Hey, buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and this is part 5 of my One Night in Karazhan card review. I've got 3 new cards to discuss, so let's go ahead and jump right into the first one. It is the new Druid spell, Moonglade Portal. This is a 6-mana spell. It's in fact got a lot of 6s in this card. It also restores 6 health to any target, so both your hero or minions, and summons a random 6-cost minion. And I think this card's really good. I think it's one of the strongest cards I've actually seen yet. First things first, Druid doesn't have problems with higher cost stuff. Thanks to cards like Innervate and Wild Growth, of course, they are able to ramp up their mana pretty rapidly. So a card like Moonglade Portal doesn't have as many risks as being kind of a slow card that sits in your hand forever. It is a defensive card in that it has a health restoration effect, so late game druids can benefit from this card. And it's just a 6-mana minion in a spell, and druids right now in particular benefit from spell synergies thanks to cards like Karazhan and Violet Teacher. So not only do you get a minion, but you also get to activate that spell synergy without actually having to run a minion. You just get a spell and a minion. So it's the best of both worlds for Druid. And most 6-cost minions in the game are actually really good. There are some absolute standouts, of course, like Cairn and Sylvanas. Then there's just a lot of average minions that are 5/5s, 5/6s, 6/5s, which you don't hate, right? That's a good body. You get the health as well from this card. The only real terrible cards, I think, at 6 mana are probably Corrupted Seer, the Murloc AoE card, and maybe Reckless Rocketeer. Although that one wouldn't even be that bad since you would just get a 5 attack charge. It is a little susceptible at 2 health, so not the highest value minion that could summon. But I mean, anytime you get that Sylvanas or Cairn or Emperor on, this card is an insane hit. And you still get a health too. So you know, what I like about Druid, of course, is they have some big taunts to hide behind. This could fit even in something like Cthulhu Druid if it's not a token card, just because it's very defensive in nature. You get your Ancient of War up, you're low health, you've stabilized the board, you use a card like this to continue pressuring the board with additional minions, but also to recover just a little bit of health to keep yourself out of burst damage reach from your opponent killing you. So another thing you can do with this card is actually heal minions, right? I've seen so many times that your Ancient of War trades into something and it has 4-5 health left, and you want to top it back off to make it a 5/10 again. Cast Moonglade Portal, develop the board, heal your minion up, and you're good to go. I just think this card fits into Druid really nicely and does some cool stuff and has a ton of value packed in. You're basically getting like a Holy Light for free, if you think about it in the terms of Paladin, and honestly almost getting a 3-mana healing touch for free. So the only risk, of course, is summoning a pretty below average minion. But still, it's a minion, it's a heal, bundled into one, saves you some cards, and packs a lot of punch into a single draw, which is always nice for Druid. So I love Moonglade Portal. I think it's great. I can't wait to play it in Druid. Good card all around. There's next up, Fool's Bane, a warrior weapon that also seems just ridiculously good to me. This is a 5-mana weapon, and it's a 3/4, so it gets to hit 4 times. So it's like 2 fiery war axes in a single card. And it has a very interesting effect. Unlimited attacks each turn, but you can't attack heroes. So you can't just send 12 to the dome when you equip Fool's Bane, and there's no way to silence a weapon right now, so that effect is not going away. You can only attack minions, but you can attack 4 times in a turn if you want. So if there are 4 3-health minions, you can kill all of them. If there's one 12-health minion, you can kill it. It just takes 4 shots. Now, that said, you're going to take a lot of face damage in a single turn if you're doing something like that. But that doesn't really matter. This card is still really good, because imagine if they have 4 or 3-health minions out, and you kill them all in a single turn. You might take a ton of damage, but you were going to take that damage next turn anyway if those minions are on the board. So it's just removing their threats and doing it in a very high tempo fashion. In other words, you're spending 5 mana to kill 4 cards at once. That's the kind of crazy play that helps Warrior stabilize the board, which is really the most important thing for Warrior to do, because they can always recover health and armor later and start winning later on. So control decks that utilize this card, it's just another tempo tool to control a board that's gotten out of hand early. So great against stuff like Zoo and Shaman. You can address all those minions as long as you don't take too much face damage in the meantime. So I don't think that this is a card you'd probably run in like a Dragon Warrior deck, because that deck needs damage and aggression, and this is more of a defensive tempo card. You don't run it in Pirate Warrior either, because you want to be able to hit the dome. But any kind of control warrior that's focused on the late game could get a lot of value out of this card. I don't know that you run it over Gorehowl, maybe. It's sort of a similar mentality, but Gorehowl has much more flexibility with its higher attack power. So Gorehowl's more value, this is more tempo. So it might be a one-of replacement for Fiery War Axe, or maybe just an extra weapon depending on the deck and what else you have. This is almost like a third Brawl in some cases, right? Like you're able to remove a lot of minions at once. So I think this is a great card. It's a cool design, a neat, interesting new effect, and fits Warrior as a class pretty perfectly in what they want to accomplish. So I think this will see some play. The only risk, of course, is just taking so much damage so quickly. But again, Warrior has ways to mitigate that risk. So I think Fool's Bane has some potential as a good card. It's just going to take the right list to make this work, and you're going to have to shuffle around some of the removal. Might have to take out a Brawl, might have to take out a Fiery War Axe, might replace it with Gorehowl, or vice versa. Like, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, but this card has the pieces necessary to be a strong card. So let's go ahead and move on to my last card in part 5 here of my review. This time it's a neutral minion by the name of Netherspite Historian, much like Museum Curator, both in artwork and somewhat in name. This is a 2-mana 1/3 instead of a 1/2, and its battle cry is, if you're holding a dragon, discover a dragon. So again, very similar effect to Museum Curator. And so it's a dragon synergy card, which is pretty cool, because a lot of dragon synergy cards will rotate out eventually with Blackrock Mountain leaving the set of standard cards. That's not happening in the near future, but in the next 6 to 8 months or so, that will be a concern. So I think Blizzard is already trying to think about how to replace some of those dragon synergy cards, and this is one of those ways. And all that said, I actually think Netherspite Historian's a really good card. I think Museum Curator is a great card for Priest and Death Rattle synergies, and it's the same story for Netherspite Historian with dragons. I will say there are very, very few bad, low-value dragon cards. Most of them are very high-cost, high-value cards. It's the Nefarias, the Yseras, all that big stuff up there. And since you're going to get to pick one of 3 when you play this card, there's a very slim chance you don't get something super good. Worst case scenario, you might get a Draconid Crusher, right, which is still a 6/6 or a 9/9, depending on the scenario. So a lot of potential value packed into that battle cry. It is reliant on having a dragon in hand, but that's never really seemed to be a problem for many dragon decks. There might be that occasional game where your hand's a little awkward, but it'll go off most of the time. The stats are a little weak for a 2-drop, right? But Museum Curator is playable, and I think this card is playable if that card is playable. It's just going to take the right kind of deck. This is another card I don't think fits Dragon Warrior as it stands right now, because that deck is much more about tempo and aggression than it is about late game value, and I think this card supports late game value much better, just because most dragons do cost a lot and don't have immediate board impacting effects. They have sort of long-term value generation effects like Ysera and Nefarian. So it's probably going to line up better in something like a Dragon Paladin or a Dragon Priest or even a Dragon Warrior, but not the tempo Dragon Warrior as we know it now, more of a late game control style Dragon Warrior. and it could work in any of those decks. I think Priest in particular, or some of the buff cards, and Paladin too, could really work with this body as a base for buffs. And it's a neat little card. It's not going to change the meta, I don't think, but it will certainly find some play in Dragon decks and control Dragon decks in particular. So I like Netherspite Historian a lot. So to sum up my thoughts, really strong card, playable in multiple versions of Druid. Really strong card, playable in Control Warriors. Really strong card, playable in any mid to late game Dragon-oriented decks. I like all three of these. It's an unusual thing so far for the Karazhan card reveals, but I think these are some of the best cards we've seen yet. Hopefully the remaining half of the set, because I think I've seen half of the set that's coming out as of these three cards. Hopefully the remaining half holds some strong cards as well. That'd make Karazhan a much more enticing offer and could really shake up the meta. So if you have any thoughts or comments on these cards, you know where to leave them. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.